Welcome. My name is Kirk, and I have been called by my band teacher in high school musically challenged. So I'm going to be trying to expand my understanding and appreciation of modern music. I've been a poetry and literature teacher and in sales and business most of my life. So I'm very much interested in literature, and I've studied the classics and, from Greek to Melville. And now I'm going to try to understand a little bit more about great lyricists. So I have been told that Bob Dylan should be considered one of the great lyricists. So let's listen to a Bob Dylan song. I'm going to tell you that I've never heard this. I try to have genuine reactions. So this is going to be me reacting or not, or loving it or not, or whatever. So hopefully you don't get mad if I don't have the reaction you want. But I try to be open-minded. So I do try to be very open-minded about my whole approach. So I'm going to listen to the song. I may pause it a couple times, but I'll try not to, but that's for the YouTube algorithm. And then afterwards, I'll give you my thoughts on the lyrics and anything I might have gleaned or did not glean out of the lyrics. Okay, so let's pop this up and go for a listen. Tangled Up in Blue. I like the hat. Been looking for a hat. Sunscreen.
Early one morning the sun was shining. She was lying in bed, wondering if she changed it all, if her hair was still red. If folks they said their lives together sure was gonna be rough. They never did like Mama's homemade dress. Papa's bank book wasn't big enough. And he was standing on the side of the road, rain falling on his shoes, heading out for the East Coast. Lord knows he paid some dues getting through. Tangled up in blue.
What's he getting?
She was married when they first met, soon to be divorced. He
Jesus.
helped her out of a jam, I guess, but he used a little too much force. And he drove that car as far as they could, abandoned it out west. Splitting up on the docks that night, both agreeing it was best. And she turned around to look at him as he was walking away, saying over her shoulder, we'll meet again someday on the avenue, tangled up in blue.
Now I'm wondering why this song was recommended to me. Oh yeah. This one
He
hurts.
had a job in Santa Fe, working in an old hotel, but he never did like it all that much, and one day it just went to hell. So he drifted down to New Orleans, lucky not to be destroyed, where he got him a job on a fishing boat docked outside Delacroix. But all the while he was alone, the past was close behind. He's seen a lot of women, but she never escaped his mind, and he just grew tangled up in blue.
Tangled Up in Sadness? Tangled Up in Blue?
She was working in a topless place, and I stopped in for a beer. I just kept looking at the side of her face and the spotlight so clear. And later on, when the crowd thinned out, I was just about to do the same. She was standing there right beside my chair, said, don't tell me, let me guess your name. I muttered something underneath my breath. She studied the lines on my face. Must admit, felt a little uneasy when she bent down to tie the laces of my shoes, tangled up in blue. I lived with them on Montague Street in a basement down the stairs. There was music in the cafes at night and revolution in the air. Well, he started into dealing with slaves, and something inside of him died. She had to sell everything she owned and froze up inside. And when it all came crashing down, I became withdrawn. The only thing I knew how to do was keep on keeping on, like a bird that flew, tangled up in blue.
I don't know.
So now I'm going on back again. I got to get to them somehow. All the faces we used to know, they're an illusion to me now. Some are mathematicians, some are truck drivers' wives. Don't know how it all got started, I don't know what they're doing with their lives. But me, I'm still on the road, heading for another joint. We always did feel the same, we just saw it from a different point of view, tangled up in blue.
This definitely requires multiple listens. It's almost at the pace of like a rap, where it's just the content is so fast. I'm not grasping. Okay. All right. So, well, I'm gonna need a sec. Let me think about this for a second. Okay. The only thing I can think to do is read through this because nothing is, to be perfectly honest, not a lot is really registering other than there was a moment that he referred to of, waking up and she was with somebody. She was already married and recently divorced. And I've been in situations like that in my life. So that one stuck out for personal reasons. I know there was something mentioned about a 13th century Italian poet. I don't know what he was referring to specifically. I don't know all the 13th century, 14th century poets, or if that even matters for the interpretation. I think Petrarch was a little early, and Dante is late 13th century when he's born. I think like 1270 or 1260 something. So those ones I'm going to struggle with on the exact dates. Now I have read them, so I don't know. I guess we can look at it. So what I think we're going to do, because this is a lot, is I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this poem as a poem. And we're going to look at it as a poem. And I think that's the only way that I can figure to do this. So, okay. And you might have noticed my reaction was terrible. And sometimes in like the last Bob Dylan one I noticed, I'll just say this. I want to tell this little quick story actually. So I told a friend last night we were having a steak dinner at Perry's Steakhouse in Austin, Texas, and with a couple friends. And I told one that I'm doing these series of videos and reaction. He says he's liked some of the other ones I've done. And I told him Bob Dylan. He's like, ew. Now this guy's very musically knowledgeable. He was in a band. He's, has very intense, interests, and he has a pretty wide range of interests and love of music, but very intense, the music that he definitely does love. And I asked him, well, why'd you react that way to Bob Dylan? He's like, a terrible musician. Lyricist is good, but terrible musician. And I'd be curious what you guys think of that, because when I hear this stuff musically, it's not really moving me that much. And it really is reliant on the song, or the lyrics itself, the poetry, essentially. So then what's the point of the music, right? Like, is that something that should be done? Or is it more like, he's he really is like this old school 12th century troubadour / jongleur who's playing these songs because he's writing and performing, but he's writing these songs and he's just adding some music in order to allow him to reach a little bit of a broader audience. Because if he just wrote the poems, probably nobody would read it. But if he writes them and then adds a little bit of music, he does. So that, to me, that's interesting. I will say that this one didn't like grab me. And at least on the first time. And that's just my honest opinion. That doesn't mean it will not grab me later. In fact, some of my favorite songs did not grab me the first couple of times that I listened. Okay, enough of that. Let's go through this. Let's see if we can get anything literarily out of it. I'm not making promises because I have not analyzed this. I've just listened to it for the first time. So, okay, so we're going to go through this. These are broken up into stanzas of 4 lines. So we start off with, early one morning, the sun was shining. I was lying in bed wondering if she'd changed at all, if her hair was still red. Okay, so the thing that I think about as a reader of poetry is like, who's talking? Who are they talking to or about? So right now I see a guy, it's from the perspective of some guy. I assume it's a guy. It's in the first person, or maybe it's Dylan himself. And he's wondering if I don't know what the hair was still red is specifically referring to, or if it's just like the passion. Like, so she had some kind of passion, and like, is the passion dead now that they're lying? And I think any of us who've been in any kind of relationship know that feeling where there was like deep passion, red passion, but then you're lying there with this person and you still maybe care for them or have feelings, but like the intensity has died down. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know, because he's wondering if she'd just change at all. I don't know. Her folks, they said our lives together was going to be rough. Okay, so he's thinking about advice from her parents who are saying that, so I'm assuming they're young, right? So they're a young couple. They never did like mama's homemade dress. Papa's bank book wasn't big enough. So yeah, that sounds like a reference to getting married, probably young, and the father. So they're gonna get like some cheap wedding. Okay, again, I'm just interpreting as I go, doing my best. And I was standing on the side of the road, rain falling on my shoes. Heading, I remember there's something reference to shoes and tying shoes later. Heading out for the East Coast. Lord knows I've paid some dues getting through tangled up in blue. So that's the refrain, tangled up in blue, which again, there's something about red. Blue is blue, just sadness, and red is passion. So he's tangled up in blue, like, and maybe that going back to the tying of shoes, like she's tying a knot to tangle them up. I don't know. So tangled up in blue seems like something relevant here. Like they're tangled up in sadness. So let me read this again. I was standing on the side of the road, raining falling on my shoes, heading out for the East Coast. Lord knows I've paid some dues getting through tangled up. Okay, so had a rough life. Okay, she was married when we first met. Okay, so this makes me think maybe she wasn't as young, or maybe she wasn't. She was just married even younger. Okay, she was married. And this is the part that struck me, of course, because I've had a couple of experiences like this where I met a married woman and soon to be divorced. I helped her out of a jam. It does feel like that, I'll be honest. I guess, but I helped her out of a jam, I guess, but I used a little too much force. I assume he's not talking about physical force, but love force. So love can definitely be force. Like I'm forceful. Based on the tone of this whole thing, I don't get any sense of physical violence. He's talking about love force. And I think any of us who've been in love and maybe put a little bit too much of ourselves too early, too fast, too hard in terms of how much we love somebody might feel that. Again, first interpretation, I don't know. You tell me where I'm wrong here. We drove that car as far as we could, abandoned it out west. So they're on a trip going out west. Wait, didn't he say East Coast? So heading out for the East Coast. Okay. Where are we going? We drove that car as fast as we could, abandoned it out west, split up on a dark, sad night, both agreeing it was best. Did it just rhyme? Is that what he did? I don't know. I'm not sure how that follows. But okay, that's a breakup, right? So split up on a dark, sad night, tangled up in blue, sad night. That's what this sounds like. Like their lives are tangled up. Okay, so that's what I'm getting. Their lives are tangled up in sadness or something. That's my overall thinking of the theme of some sort. She turned around to look at me as I was walking away. I heard her say over my shoulder, "We'll meet again someday on the avenue." Tangled up in blue. On the avenue, maybe where they're from or just like the avenue of life. I had a job in the Great North Woods working as a cook for a spell, but I never did like it all that much. And one day the axe just fell. So Woods, axe, he got the axe, right? He got fired. That's my assumption. So I drifted down to New Orleans, where I's lucky for to be employed, got a job working for a while on a fishing boat right outside Delacroix. Okay, cool. I like the rhyme. It's a cute rhyme. Wait, New Orleans wait, where's the rhyme? Hold on. New Orleans employed fishing boat Delacroix. Maybe not. Take that back. I just like the word Delacroix, I guess. But all the while I was alone, the past was close behind. I seen a lot of women, but she never escaped my mind, and I just grew tangled up in blue. Okay, that's another thing that I can sympathize with, to be honest, is, but all the while I was alone, so life is a very lonely thing. The past was close behind. So the past, no matter how long of a distance you are from the past, it can feel like long behind. And I can name one or two or three, particular experiences with women in my life that are like, feels like it's always right on my heels in a sense. No matter how long time goes, it's like right there. And I think I've had one not that long ago that I talked, vaguely about on my on this show, where it's like, I'm pretty sure that one's never going to go away. And I've seen a lot of women, but she never escaped my mind, and I just grew tangled up in blue. Okay, so I'm liking this song, or the lyrics a bit, just because it seems like there's a resonance to real life on some level. She was working in a topless place, and I stopped in for a beer. Okay. Now, when I listened to the song, I thought that this was a different person than the person above, right? Because it felt like it was Dylan all of a sudden, but now it's like, but maybe like, but the other one didn't feel like Dylan. So I'm not sure what I'm missing here, but it feels different. She was working on a topless place and I stopped in for a beer. So we have a change of scenery, like, or time. And I'm assuming if I looked at this more closely, the refrain, so it's like these are their own. I mean, that looks like a sonnet right there in terms of length, right? So that there's, I mean, it's a little, what is this sonnet? Like 16 lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lines. Close. I don't know. I shouldn't be mumbling on a podcast. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. She was working on a topless place and I stopped in for a beer. I just kept looking at the sight of her face in the spotlight so clear. So it looks like there's a distance in time. And then he sees her at a strip club. And later on, when the crowd thinned out, eyes just about to do the same. She was standing there in the back of my chair, said, "Tell me, don't I know your name?" So it's like, I recognize you. I muttered something underneath my breath. So now I'm starting to freak out and think that maybe this is like it's the same person or it's different people, but they're like same type of character. You know how the idea that you fall in love with the type, right? And there's a category. So it's like you keep repeating patterns by the type of person that you date. And, you know, like that's where the recognition, I don't know. Again, I'm just throwing out stuff as I go. Tell me if you like this kind of on the fly analysis, you know, because this is supposed to be a first time reaction. I muttered something underneath my breath. She studied the lines on my face. I must admit, I felt a little uneasy. I don't like that. I must admit, I felt a little, it's very awkward. When she bent down to tie the laces of my shoe, tangled up in blue. So the imagery is interesting because the question is, why is she tying up the laces of his shoe? There's some imagery of tangled up in blue because that's like a recognition thing. Like you tie up, you know, a child's laces is what you think of. I don't know if I've ever had a woman tie up the laces of my shoe. Besides when I was a child, my mother did. She lit a burner on the stove, I guess a cigarette, and offered me a pipe or maybe a pipe. Weed? I don't. I'm square as hell, man. I thought you'd never say hello, she said. You look like the silent type. Okay. Then she opened up a book of poems and handed it to me, written by an Italian poet from the 13th century. Yeah. Then she opened up a book of poems and handed it to me, written by an Italian poet from the 13th century. So that's why I'm thinking Petrarch or Dante, but there's obviously a slew of 13th century Italian poets, and I don't know all of them. I've read a good amount of Dante. I've read some Petrarch. And let me see. Yeah, I remember this part. So, and every one of them words rang true and glowed like burning coal. So one of the things I always liked about Dante's the Commedia is it's about a man at the middle part of his life. So he's, I think, 35, because it's like biblical middle of the life. So that's, I think, with the Bible's middle of the life. And it's, you know, starts off with like, I don't remember the Italian, I wish I did, but I started this journey in the middle of, found myself lost in the middle of a forest in the middle of my journey or something like that, in the middle of my life. And that's the beginning of the Commedia. And then this whole story is Dante, the person, the poet, going through, obviously he goes through hell, purgatory, and then eventually into heaven, essentially, where he meets Beatrice, and he's guided by Beatrice. So I'm now thinking that this is Dante, that he read Dante and that it had an impact on him. And it had an impact on me, by the way. One of my more successful, in terms of being popular, articles that I wrote on poetry is a poem I wrote. I'll have to put a link to it, but it's something like on a lesson from poetry on my 35th birthday, where I talk about Lord Byron and Dante, and the poem by Byron called On My 35th Birthday or something like that. Every one of them words rang true and glowed like burning coal, pouring off of every page like it was written in my soul from me to you, tangled up in blue. Okay, lost in the woods, tangled up in blue. Maybe there's something there. I lived with them on Montague Street. Okay, Montague Street. I live with them? Who's them? The words? Okay, because he's talking about, and every one of them words, and I lived with them on Montague Street. In a basement down the stairs, there was music in the cafes at night and revolution in the air. Revolution in the Air. Okay, so I'm assuming this was written like, what, 60s, 70s or something? Or maybe he's thinking about the 60s, like the revolutionary in terms of cultural revolution in America, the counter-revolution. Then he started into dealing with slaves, and something inside of him died. She had to sell everything she owned and froze up inside. I have no idea. So maybe it's not, if this, okay, so hold on. So if this is a stanza, then maybe this is something completely different and I shouldn't take them together. Or not a stanza, if this goes together, if we take each refrain as having some kind of meaning behind it, maybe it doesn't necessarily build onto the next one. I lived with them on Montague Street in a basement down the stairs. There was music in the cafe. So maybe he's talking about people he lived with, not necessarily the words, and I'm wrong to connect these two words, this them, the pronoun here, is not referring to words, but referring to people that he knew at the time in this revolutionary era in his life. Then he started into dealing with slaves, and something in him died. So maybe that's some of the people Dylan was living with at this time. She had to sell everything she owned and froze up inside. And when finally the bottom fell out, I became withdrawn. The only thing I knew how to do was to keep on keeping on, like a bird that flew, tangled up in blue. So something happened. I don't really know. You guys are going to have to tell some of this to me. I'll have to study some of it or something. So now I'm going back again. I got to get her somehow. All the people we used to know, they're an illusion to me now. Some are mathematicians. Okay, so this I remember this part. So this makes me think of things that when people were, when I was in college and people were talking about the revolution, and you see this sometimes portrayed in movies where you have, the cultural revolution, the sexual revolution, the hippies and everything of the 60s and 70s, and they had these radical new ideas, quote unquote. I don't know if they were actually that radical, but radical new ideas. They were rioting, they were fighting against the man. But then, this is when they were in their 20s. But then, of course, they grew up and they became tenured professors, or they became mathematicians, or, blue collar workers like everybody else, right? And then all the stuff of revolution dies down. So I don't know if that's what he's referring to here. Some are mathematicians, some are carpenters' wives. Don't know how it all got started. I don't know what they do with their lives. I don't know what most people do with their lives either. I don't know what I do with my life sometimes. But me, I'm still on the road. Okay, that's probably more like me. That's like the artist's way, is to be on the road, right? That's the troubadour. That's the way of the troubadour, to be on the road, the wandering minstrel singing songs or bringing art to people. But me, I'm still on the road heading for another joint. We always did feel the same. We just saw it from a different point of view, tangled up in blue. All right, so I don't know that I have that much extra to say that I haven't said in this, because I'm not 100% in love with it, other than it seems like it's a pleasant or interesting meandering through this life that probably Dylan himself held. None of the words really captured me. I did my first Dylan poem, or I'm calling it poetry because I'm reading it like poetry. The song was Every Grain of Sand, I believe it was. And that one had some really good turns of phrases. Here, it's more like a narrative, and it's more colloquial, simple phrases. I don't see anything that intriguing, and a lot of it is a little confusing. Now, that doesn't mean a lot of poetry is very confusing. I will say that to me, if I were to read this once in a book of poetry or even listen to it without this reaction video, I probably would not listen to it again. And now that doesn't mean I'm correct. It just means that it didn't grab me this time. That the other one the first Bob Dylan one I did, there's something about the tone that definitely grabbed me. And I pay attention to that. Like, why is it? Was there something because it was mystical and Kirk is mystical or something? And this one, the thing that struck out to me in this one was the experiences of loneliness that he had, but nothing about it, it seemed kind of almost cliche in a sense. Like nothing about it really was powerful. And like, yes, I've had that experience, but a lot of people have written about that experience. And what is he doing that's unique in this story? Now, that doesn't mean anything about the rest of the songs on the track. And that doesn't even mean that I'm correct in my analysis or understanding. I may have missed some really deeply meaningful things. And if I did, please let me know in the comments and I'll, explore it. And, maybe I'll try to have more experiences with this. Maybe I'll do a second poetry reading and experience of this where I won't say this is my first time hearing Bob Dylan's Tangled Up in Blue. Anyway, so this went on longer than I expected because I did do the poetry, or try to do an on-the-fly poetry analysis. By the way, that is how I kind of read poetry. I read it once or twice actually to myself and try to read it out loud. In this case, I listened to him. Normally I would do that a couple times and then I go through it in the way that I did. And then if I really want to know more about it, I'll, scribble in some notes and try to understand it on a deeper level. And sometimes I will like actually look things up to see what, other people have already said about it. And then I'll put in my own thoughts and go. That's, the depth of the analysis or that I do for a poem or a song or a work of art depends on my individual interests in it. Like, do I want to know more about this or not? And that's where personal interest really should guide you. Okay. I've gone on long enough. Thank you for those of you who stuck around to the whole time. Let me know in the comments what kind of analysis that I got wrong. What's your favorite part of this song? And what are some other songs that I should be doing? I do have a queue of songs that I need to be listening to. And I think I'm going to try to do this whole album because I believe the person that recommended this to me said the album is worthwhile, not just the individual song, but it could be another album. So let me know if you think that's a good idea as well. Okay. Thank you guys. And I'll see you next time.